I swear I'm going to get this done. I've been having problems over the last little while with this camera. This is the Logitech 930E. A really fancy way of saying it's a widescreen camera. And it is the newest model and all that other wonderful stuff. And it gave you the beautiful widescreen that you can't see right now. But it stopped responding to my attempts to change the brightness, which with the way that the sun comes in through this window is just a nightmare at times. It has been getting stuck a lot. And so I went in and I thought, well, maybe it's something with the computer, and I tried messing around with display adapters and drivers and all that other wonderful stuff. I am glad that I have some techie experience where I can go, okay, I can tech this myself. And so I went through and teched everything, and what I found out was it's the camera. It's not the software, it's the camera. And so I have a second computer. I'm going to try that camera on, and I may have to switch computers, which I didn't want to do, because the other computer in here, Yvonne's been using during live streams. But yeah, I may have to switch computers or get a new camera, one or the other. But for now, we're using the old Logitech 922. The 922 is just fine. There's nothing wrong with this camera. It's just I replaced it with the 930. So this is why you don't throw the old stuff out. This is why when you get new stuff, you don't take the old stuff and get rid of it, because you never know when you might need. You have to have a backup. That's why I have two computers. So if this one just is on fire, and go, oh, it's on fire, and then just put the other one in there. When you make your living online, gotta be prepared at all times. Okay. Preamble aside, let us get to grading teams at the quarter mark of the season, which is a bit perilous. Last year when I did this, people said I was too kind. I didn't give teams failing grades. You should give a team a failing grade. And then it's a matter of, do you grade teams on where you thought they were going to be and where the pundits thought they would be, or do you grade them just on where they are in the standings? No, you don't grade them just on where they are in the standings, because then it's just, I would put up the standings 1 through 31 and go, here's A, B, C, and D. Good night, everybody. So no, you grade them on where you thought they would be and how they're playing. So it's not just a matter of the wins and the losses, but where do we expect them to be, and is there an explanation? So, starting with Anaheim. There's people right now going, that's preamble too, you know. Starting with Anaheim, I'm going to give them a C. I would have given them an A after their first 8 games. They were playing this great trap. They were playing fantastic. John Gibson looked like he was cruising to a Vezina trophy this year. And then the rest of the quarter happened, and a quarter of the way through the season, Anaheim's in trouble. So I'll give them a C because we didn't expect them to necessarily tear up the whole league. But at the same time, it's been a troubling turn of things. The Arizona Coyotes. You know what? I'm going to do this differently than I did it the first time around. I'm going to give teams that get an A, I'm going to give them a green A. As green is for go. As in, go ahead and don't mention it. You have to be an Office fan to get that. So for Arizona, I give them an A. And they've had a fantastic run, mostly. They've had some issues at different parts here and there, but nothing major. And they just came off of back-to-back 2-point games. Victories over Washington and St. Louis. And I'm not sure if people know this, but they won the Stanley Cup not that long ago. So for Arizona, it's a solid A. So for Boston, black marker out. Overall B+. They're first in the Atlantic. They've got an excellent record. Recently, not so much. Recently, there's been some problems. So with recent problems being as they are, I can't give them an A and just say, yeah, everything's great, because I have issues with the way their defense has played lately. Their goaltendings look kind of pedestrian. And just the feeling that this is a one-line team. I can't escape that myself. And as a fan of the team, I think one-line team with the Bruins. So if you think that out there and you're not a Bruins fan, you're not alone. And they need to show that they can make this work when the first line isn't necessarily working for them. Buffalo, I'm going to go with a B as well. However, B- based on their most recent streak of non-winning. We'll put it that way. It's not as bad as I think some Buffalo fans may be worried that it is. When your team hasn't made the playoffs in a while, it can be really difficult to have faith that they're going to do it. But for Buffalo, I think things aren't that bad. They do need their goaltending to get back to where it was early in the season. They do need to see more scoring and that depth and all that wonderful stuff that you need to make the playoffs. But I don't think Buffalo's that bad off. Nor do I think that they're deserving of a C or a C minus or anything like that for the quarter. Remember, this is for the quarter of the season we've enjoyed so far. On the Calgary side of things, well, for Calgary, I'm going with a C+. Calgary was a first-place team last year. The expectation was they should be pretty darn good this year as well. They lost Mike Smith. They got Cam Talbot. Talbot has not been the reason that they're not as good this year. As great as Smith has been for the Oilers, for the most part, Smith's exit is not why Calgary's had their struggles here and there. And again, remember, this is for the quarter. I don't know that I see Calgary as a contender. I don't know whether or not Calgary might be kind of still dealing with the ghosts of what happened during the spring where they lost in the first round or what it is, but something seems off with the Flames and with Johnny Gaudreau. And this is a team that's got to figure this out. Because again, the Pacific Division, it feels like it's an improved division. I say feels like because a lot of Pacific Division teams have started falling. And yet, here's Arizona. Edmonton's pretty good, and Vancouver somehow is up there as well. So it's a confusing division to look at because the teams you expected to be at the top aren't. We'll see whether or not Calgary can get back there. Carolina had a great start, 5 wins in a row. Since then, it's been roller coaster, and so overall, it's a C for them. So far, no failing grades. I continue to be a very, very fine grader of teams, and I want to see everybody pass. No student falls behind. And Carolina's one of them. And all kidding aside, Carolina is a pretty decent team. They're a young team. Young teams go through this. I still have that same concern I did before the season started. Going from McElhinney and Mrazek to Mrazek and Reimer to me felt like a downgrade at the time. And so far, the numbers haven't been as good as they were last year for their goaltending. So, yeah. Chicago's had a good little run. So while I'm not going to give them a B, I'll give them a C+. Chicago, and that win last night over Vegas was a good one. Chicago, they're showing that they are still in contention. And again, a lot of it depends on Taves and Kane, right? Still, all these years later, and it's still, well, what are Taves and Kane doing? Are they producing? Then Chicago's probably winning. And right now, Kane's producing a ton. Taves has been point a game for the last 6 games. And it's been good enough to make them relevant again and get them back to 500. So they're probably right about where we had expected. So C+. Colorado, I don't see any way you can't give them an A. They had a great start. They had a 5-game period where they were 0-4-1. I saw power rankings today on NHL.com. They had them drop down to 12. 12 on the power rankings during their slump, and then moved them back up to 5 this week. I don't do that. This is why I try not to be too reactionary. And I know people get mad at me for my power rankings because the team will go on a run, and it won't necessarily reflect in my power rankings right away, but eventually it does. And this is kind of why, because you'll see this huge bounce down and then bounce right back up, and it feels reactionary. I don't think Colorado was ever playing really badly. I think after you've lost Landeskog and Rantanen, there's a bit of an adjustment. They went through that adjustment, and now they're right back to playing really well again. That game against Winnipeg, the fact that Werner was in there and he gets a shutout, shares a shutout technically with Francouz, but still, that's fantastic. Columbus overall, they're right about where was expected, so I give them a C. This is about what we figured they were going to do. They had a half-decent start. The concern you could have if you're Columbus is, the one I had at the start of the year, which was goaltending. Korpisalo, he's temperamental. As long as he's winning, that's great. But when you're losing and you're temperamental, right? So Merzlikins may find himself getting some more starts if Korpisalo continues to be emotional and upset about things. Because Tortorella's like, I'm the one that gets to lose his temper, not you. Me. I lose my temper. All kidding aside, I think he really appreciates guys who wear their hearts on their sleeve as long as it's not affecting their play. So if he feels like Korpisalo's temper is starting to affect his play in net, Merzlikins will get more games. Dallas right now at 9-8-2. People might expect a good grade for them because they've had this fantastic run. But this fantastic run was necessary to dig their way out of this horrible run they had at the start of the year. So overall, it's a C+. I still have concerns about their offense. I have tremendous concern about Jamie Benn not putting up points. Yes, Jamie Benn's advanced stats are good, but advanced stats don't always lead up to goals. Sometimes advanced stats are just that. They're just this nice thing to look at and go, this player's pretty good and he doesn't get a lot of attention. Or, yeah, this player's in a slump, but look. But until I start seeing goals and points, it's an issue. So for me with Dallas, I have concerns, but still, I give them a C+ for the quarter. Detroit, that losing streak they had was so brutal. I would give them a D, but the wins they've had over the last week move them to a C-. So for the quarter, C-. I'm fine with that. They're not a failing team, but they're close. I don't want to be too harsh with Detroit, though. Detroit, they're 28th overall. They're not 31st. Of course, Detroit fans are going to be like, great, we're not going to get the number 1 draft pick again. Finishing last doesn't necessarily mean the number 1 draft pick. It can, but it doesn't necessarily. Oilers, you have to give them an A. I understand that they lost their most recent game against San Jose 6-3. I understand that there may be some feeling, well, they're just going to fall out. They're not going to be this good. The thing is, every time that it looks like they're ready to fall back, they don't. Every time that it looks like the Oilers are going to take a massive drop, they really don't. The Oilers have bounced back from everything. And we will see with them against Colorado, 2 teams that are A's against each other, we will see whether or not the Oilers are capable of bouncing back from where they've been. I'm wearing an Oilers jersey because, you know what? They've proven me wrong so far. I have no problem admitting that. And we'll see whether or not that continues to be the case this year. Florida. Okay, with Florida, Florida's tricky. Florida's overall record is poor. Kind of, sort of. They've won 9 out of 18 games. So they're winning 50% of their game. But Florida fans will say, we've only lost 4 in regulation, and we've had a rough schedule. I can't argue with that. I can't give them a B because they were expected to be one of the better teams in the Atlantic. And to my money, for my money and to my mind, they haven't quite lived up to that yet. Now, we'll see when they play against lesser opponents how things work out. But I'm on the fence right now. Because just because you're playing lesser opponents doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get better results. So we'll see whether or not they turn things around. And if they do, then when we reach the halfway mark, this will be a B. Kings. Right, yeah. Kings, it's a big old D. I'll give them a D- even. So this is a failing grade for them. I don't understand why we're in this spot. And I'm going to go back to the whole Kovalchuk thing that's going on right now. I don't know why they got Kovalchuk. I don't know what their thinking was with any of this. And overall, this is a team that's in some disarray, and I think it's going to get uglier before it gets better. Meaning, Jonathan Quick's going to find his way. Either they keep Quick and they get rid of Campbell or Peterson, because one of them isn't going to clear waivers next year, or they move Quick at some point. But for me, the Kings have been it's been a rough year so far. Now, that being said, Minnesota, I'll give them a D. Now, Minnesota is not as dysfunctional as the Kings are right now. It feels like things with the Kings could get more dramatic. Now, whether that's Kovalchuk leaving means that things will get better, or Kovalchuk potentially leaving ends up sitting on a bench, and everybody wondering what's going on with Kovy, what's going on with the rest of us, who's next, and what happens with that, we have yet to see. But Minnesota doesn't have that yet that I've seen. Minnesota going to Bill Guerin from Paul Fenton. They've definitely improved their management situation. However, the team overall is still a work in progress, and they've just looked miserable on a lot of nights. Montreal. The Montreal Canadiens right now are a B+. And going back to what I saw with the NHL.com and their power rankings, they have Montreal just in their top 16. I currently on my power rankings have Montreal sitting at 11th. I have bumped them up. There are some teams above them that, had that week that I mentioned in last week's power rankings. Montreal could move up, and they have. So there are a lot of people who are kind of slow to pick up on Montreal, and it's a matter of looking at the roster and going, can this roster really make the playoffs? Like, is there enough scoring? Is there enough elite level talent to get there? Now, Shea Weber's been fantastic. Carey Price has been solid enough. But the interesting thing is, Price's numbers haven't been otherworldly, and yet Montreal's in a playoff position. So for Montreal right now, I'm giving them a solid B+, same grade I gave Boston, and I think they've been pretty good. I think we're looking at a pretty good team here. All right, moving along, Nashville. Nashville, for me, again, overall grade for the quarter, B. They've played well. They're right about where we expected them to be. There has been a bit of a slide recently, but you know what? Every team has that during the season. When you're looking at over the entire quarter, it's a B for me. New Jersey. Oh, black marker for New Jersey. And again, I heard I'll give them a D+. It's not a grade they like to give out. Tommy boy. New Jersey, there are signs, and they'll have these moments where, okay, Heischer's going great, and Hall's getting some points, and now Hughes is picking it up, and everything looks good. They had that big win in Vancouver, and it looked like maybe this is no. Overall, they keep dipping back down. The PK Subban acquisition, are we too early to say that Subban at $9 million, it's probably too much money under the cap? And at some point, Subban's contract may find its way out of New Jersey as well. That was a big part of the reason why Montreal traded him to Nashville, was that contract. They thought that was too rich for their blood, and Nashville traded him to New Jersey because to bring in Duchesne, they had to shed some salary, and it was Subban that left town. So New Jersey is in a very interesting position. We'll see what they do from now to the trade deadline, because Taylor Hall probably going to end up out of town. The Islanders. Oh, the Islanders. We're going A+ with the Islanders. This has been an absolute machine. These guys play great defense. The goaltending's fantastic. And there really isn't any part of the roster I look at and see a weakness. This is as close to a perfect roster as I see. And when I see people talking about Barry Trotz is the best coach, yep. And they have the best goaltending coach, yep. Now, GM did a pretty good job, too, and you look at everybody that he's added. You look at how this roster is constituted right now, and even the fact that he gave up Leonard and he brought in Varlamov, which a lot of us went, what? Now, while Leonard's played very, very well for Chicago, is a big part of the reason why they're a C+ instead of a C, Varlamov's been pretty solid as well. So there's been no controversy about that, and this is a team that got better after Tavares left as well. So overall, the Islanders, very, very good. The Rangers... I'm going to go with a B-. Again, they've had their fast start. They've been good lately. They've had mixed results in between. And they're, again, one of those teams that it feels like there's a lot of new faces, whether it's rookies, guys brought in, this kind of thing, and they're still figuring it out. And their blue line sometimes has some misadventures, but they're okay. And we had expected them to probably not be a playoff team this year anyway, so the fact they're 8-6-2, they're above 500, that's a pleasant surprise to some of us. And Kakko has looked really good. He has 6 goals right now, and he seems to be getting better as the year goes along. Ottawa. I'm not going to give Ottawa a failing grade. I'm not. I'll go with a C+. And again, if you want to argue a B on them, I can't argue against it. The thing is, this organization just in general, it's not a tire fire anymore. It's not really at that level, but I can't bump them up much above C+, because their record is still pretty bad. And they, for every game like last night they had where they went in and beat the Devils, they have like the 8-2 drubbing they took against Carolina. So they're better than I had expected, thus the C+. But how far can this go? Can they actually reach the playoffs? They're above 500 in their last 11 games. So they could at the very least be much better than was expected, which again, if you're an Ottawa fan, would equal, great, we're not going to get Lafreniere because we decided to be good. We're going to get like a 6th or 7th draft pick. Flyers. Overall, Flyers, and again, this is overall, I'll go with a B+. I would not be surprised to see the Flyers as an A at the halfway mark of this season. Carter Hart He's arrived. He's here. It's time. It's time for Carter Hart. He's starting their next game as well. So Elliott's officially the backup. Hart's the starter. And that is the best news you can have. That he's playing really, really well. His numbers have come up. And he is now the starter. The Flyers, who have searched for a really good first number one goaltender, I would argue going back to Ron Hextall's best days. Now they've got it with Carter Hart, and it's a matter of running with that, and we'll see what happens. Pittsburgh, it is, you know what, their record hasn't been fantastic, but considering injuries, I'm going to just give them a B. They've had injuries to key players. They've had a lot of guys out. And yet they've managed to put up some victories. We will see over the next minimum 6 weeks without Crosby how they do. But I wouldn't bet against them somehow staying in the mix for a playoff position. I don't know that they end up staying in a playoff position, but at least being in the mix. That's kind of a victory if you're Pittsburgh. San Jose. The Sharks. I'm kind of leaning towards a D for the Sharks. But their recent winning, I'll give them a C-. I'll give them a C-. I'll give them, say they're passing, but at 8-10-1, it's tough to argue that they belong above a red D. But still, I'll say that they get a C- based on their recent winning that they've been doing. They've looked a lot better. Jones is Jones. He's going to have a save percentage below 900. That's going to happen. You have to minimize the amount of shots against. And you have to be able to score a bunch of goals. San Jose seems to be able to do both. And we'll see whether or not at the half their grade gets better. But for right now, it's a C- for them. St. Louis. I'm going to go with an A+ for St. Louis. The same grade that I gave the Islanders. You know why? It is very easy for a team coming off of a Stanley Cup to struggle to start the season. It happens to most, I would argue. I don't have the data on that. But I would argue that to most, it is tough in October/November. Sometimes it's in January. That it's tough to get really up for these games. You might have some aches and pains holding over from the Stanley Cup run. And just that emotional high you had during the Stanley Cup playoffs, you may not have it during the regular season. It may not feel the same. But for St. Louis, they just seem to be getting better and better. And they were getting wins in games where they didn't necessarily play their best. And I think they're a very, very dangerous team. I do. I think there's a lot of danger with St. Louis right now. So we'll see how far they go. But for right now, I give them an A+. Tampa. Now, here's where expectation comes in. For Tampa, it's a C-. Yeah, they won the 2 against Buffalo when they went overseas. But boy, were they expected to be better than this. The expectation with Tampa was pretty high. There were a lot of people who said, hey, they won 62 games last year. They should win at least 50 this year. And yeah, they should probably win another President's Trophy. Not necessarily the Stanley Cup, although a lot of people were picking them to win the Cup too. Tampa, for me, has been disappointing. I could almost justify a D, but really, they're at 8-5-2. That would be overreacting. But winning 8 out of 15 compared to what they were expected to do is a C-. Toronto's hard to grade. Toronto's hard to grade because they've missed Tavares. They have missed Marner's out now. And so those are key pieces. Tavares for a while there and Marner now. But yeah, it is tough to grade the Leafs. I'll go with the black marker. I'm not going with a D. I'm not going with a fail, but a C-. C- because Barrie hasn't worked out. Kadri's been very good for Colorado. Barrie has not worked out for Toronto. They're not keeping Barrie after this year. He's purely a rental. There's no way they can afford Barrie next year. Unless Barrie's playing really, really badly to lower his market value. And then do you want to keep him in Toronto? There always seems to be some sort of a turmoil. It's created by the media, largely, yes. But this is a roster that has underperformed. And we've seen Hutchinson go out. Now Kaskisuo is going to be the backup. And just, it feels like things are just not working out for Toronto. And at this rate, I don't know how they make the playoffs. I don't. Maybe once everybody gets healthy, sure. But there just feels like there's a dysfunction with the Leafs that is hard to pin down. And again, I know people are going to say, well, it's all Babcock. And there's something to the idea that Babcock's plans with Toronto are sketchy. But that being said, there are players on this team who have underperformed, and we'll see how things turn out for them. Toronto or Vancouver, I'm not giving them an A. People might expect Vancouver to get an A, but I'll give them a B plus. 10, 6, and 3. That's better than was expected. I had figured, if they can get 83, 84 points, maybe 90, that'd be great. But at this point, they're on pace for more than that. And Pettersson looks pretty good. Their goaltending has been excellent. And so overall, the Canucks are as advertised by the optimistic fans of the Canucks and not as advertised by the pessimistic fans of the Canucks. And what this season does, if they make the playoffs, does it exonerate Benning from all these other things that have been said about him? Or are people who didn't like the job Jim Benning did over the years, are they still going to be single-mindedly saying, you know what, this doesn't matter. They made the playoffs, that's fine, but they just made the playoffs because there's a franchise player in the draft like they did in 2015, and they're going to go right back to being bad next year. I don't know. I maybe. That's probably the expectation. Vegas. Vegas has been a disappointment. I'll go with a C minus for Vegas as well. Vegas was supposed to be a lot better than this. And there will be those that argue, they weren't that good anyways. But I'm sorry, when you've had 2 good years in a row, it is surprising in year 3 when things fall apart. Their defense, not great. And where it really stands out for me with Vegas is the offense from the blue line. The scoring from the blue line seems to be where I see a great weakness. And it'll affect your special teams. It will affect a lot of the play and the way teams play against you, knowing we don't have to worry about the blue line scoring, except Schmidt, really. Shea Theodore has not had the kind of season this year he had last year. So for Vegas, there are concerns. And Vegas could find themselves out of the playoffs. We have 31 teams in the league, 16 make the playoffs. That means about half the league misses. There are good teams that miss the playoffs. Vegas got to get it together. And I think the other frustrating part as well is that Fleury's starting to show some signs of getting older, and you might want to think about replacing him. That kind of play, and Vegas can't really afford that. They don't really have anybody in their system that can step in as a starter and get that job done right out of the gate. Maybe Dylan Ferguson becomes that guy eventually. Just throwing out there the name of a kid they have in their system. But for Vegas, there's some concerns. Capitals. If I don't give the Capitals an A+ when I gave the Islanders an A+, Adam's going to yell at me. So the Caps get an A+. They've had points in their last 13 games, the same as the Islanders. And this has been great. And what's scary about the Capitals is how often they've won games without needing a goal or a point from Ovechkin. How often they've been able to get wins without needing Backstrom to get it done. This is a team now that has various weapons. Owen Carlson, he really should win the Norris. I can't see any way that he doesn't based on the first quarter of the season. I'm not doing trophy predictions. I may do that at the half, but at the quarter mark, Carlson really, he should be the guy. And Holtby had a really rough start to the season. He's been pretty good since then. Winnipeg, it depends on the night. Winnipeg, honestly, I have to give them a C+, and here's why I'll give them a C+. I can put the markers down now. Winnipeg gets a C+ due to the fact that when Byfuglien says he's not sure what he's going to do, we don't know, and it doesn't really matter. He's injured. He's had surgery, so he's not going to be any good to go till maybe March, and at that point, there's no point in him coming back. So at the very, very least, it's a year off for Byfuglien. We had all expected this team to just absolutely tank right out. They haven't. They've been inconsistent. They've had games where their defenses look miserable. Pionk playing as much as he has, I had expected Pionk to falter and wither under that amount of pressure. He hasn't, and the team hasn't. This has been a very, very impressive overall run for Winnipeg, considering what we might have expected without Byfuglien. But they get a C+. There are a few losses they had which are concerning. And there are some wins they got with Hellebuck that they probably shouldn't have. So overall, I'm saying a little bit better than I might have thought. I'll give them that C+. But You guys can let me know what you think in the comment section below. Again, usually people say I'm too easy on teams. Now people are probably going to say I'm too hard on them. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Your grades for the quarter mark of the season. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. And as soon as I'm able to, we'll be back with widescreen videos. But from now until then, I don't think it's going to be a big deal. I had videos that were framed like this for years, and it was fine. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I'll talk to you again soon.